You're watching Battle of Champions as we build up to the big final of the T20 World Cup 2021 edition. It's going to be Australia versus New Zealand, the trans-Tasman rivalry, and we keep looking at the record of both these teams in ICC tournaments, and you know that Australia hold the edge. This is also going to be the repeat of the 2015 50-over World Cup final, and remember, out of the 18 games that these two teams have played in ICC tournaments, 12 times Australia have won. Can New Zealand turn this record around? That's what we'll be discussing on our show this evening. Joining us two legends of the sport in Wasim Akram and Sunil Gavaskar. Now, before I get their thoughts on this particular encounter, let's bring you some news closer home. Now, the Indian test team for the series versus New Zealand was announced yesterday, but the biggest talking point wasn't with regards of selection of a player. It was more so with regards to the non-selection of a player. I'm talking about Hanuma Vihari, someone who played his last test match for India on literally one leg and then helped India save that test match in Sydney. Then was also part of the England tour, but was on the bench, didn't get a chance to play in the playing 11. Now that the team was announced for the New Zealand tour, many expected that he would make the cut, but unfortunately selectors did not select him in this particular edition of the test series versus New Zealand. He though has been selected for the India A tour that will travel to South Africa ahead of their all-important South African series that India would be participating in. For more on this, I'm joined by Sunil Gavaskar. Sunil, let me start with the non-selection of Hanuma Vihari. You thought that after players like Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli and all were rested, we saw him in that England series sitting on the bench because India would go in with one less batsman. They went in with more bowlers. You thought that he would walk into that playing 11 once that test match started in Kanpur, but doesn't find his name there. What did you make of his non-selection?
Well, I think he wasn't surprised, to be honest, because he's had very little cricket in the interim. He hasn't played anything in the IPL, so he's hardly had any cricket under his belt for the last maybe 3 or 4 months. On the other hand, the others who have been selected have had some cricket, not necessarily test cricket, and therefore maybe that is the reason why they came into the picture. Also, I think a lot of times we've seen over the years that the performances in the IPL have always is not the right word, invariably been the ones that nudge the selection committee, and I think that seems to have happened. Hanuma Vihari has a second play a single IPL game, and so out of sight, out of mind.
All right, Saibhai, as you were talking about, probably sometimes it's the IPL performances that come into play, even though that's a different format. As a player, let me ask you now, the kind of logic that we are getting to here is that the fact that India would be going to South Africa, that's going to be an important tour. So let's prep him up for that. And so he's been included. Let me also remind our viewer, he was included as an afterthought in that India A squad because that squad was announced 3 days earlier. And in the evening when there was a lot of hue and cry, then his name was added to that India A tour. But even if I was to take that logic of prepping him up, what would you rather prefer as a player? Playing a test match and prepping, even though it's coming in different conditions, or going and playing an A game?
Well, I think if he's going and playing in the A team, I think that's very good. He's going to be playing in the same kind of conditions, so he'll get some match practice under his belt. He'll get a feel of the conditions, the pitch conditions, everything, and therefore he will be absolutely ready. So, in case he's called for the test team, so that is a big advantage for him going to South Africa with the A team.
All right, we'll wait and watch if this sort of approach by the BCCI really works for the Indian team. But the question many are going to ask is, even if Hanuma Vihari was to practice in South Africa, we've seen that it's very tough for him to make that playing 11. Will that happen in South Africa? Again, is something that, only time will tell. But Saibhai, stay on with us. Our big focus on this program is going to be that big final between Australia and New Zealand. I already gave you some sort of stats of how Australia hold the edge in that particular encounter. But if you look at man-to-man, two teams are very well matched. If you're going to talk about David Warner, the opener on form for Australia, on the other side you've got Daryl Mitchell, who's been outstanding in terms of both teams having great leg spinners. Ish Shodhi has been picking up wicket, but then Adam Zampa does the same for Australia. Good fast bowlers from both sides. You've got Trent Bolt and Southee for New Zealand, and then you've got Mitchell Starc and Hazelwood for Australia. Let's see how this particular matchup looks like.
New Zealand versus Australia. The trans-Tasman clash will decide the new T20 champions of the world.
Full toss won't be a no ball. Will it go for four? It does.
The Aussies and the Black Caps will renew their rivalry in the summit clash after both teams registered near identical wins in their semi-final matches.
He does it again.
Considering how both teams went on to win their respective encounters, despite being the underdogs, there's very little to choose between the two sides.
Into the final of the ICC Men's World T20. Short, hit leg side.
While Daryl Mitchell and Jimmy Neesham's heroics propelled the Kiwis into the final,
For six, I think. Yep, all the way. Hits it down the ground, flat.
it was Matthew Wade and Marcus Stoinis' late assault that took the Aussies over the line against Pakistan.
Might go for four, does go for four. Hassan Ali under pressure. Sounded good. Is good. Brilliant.
The final overs in both the games were nerve-wracking. The late onslaught from both the teams produced more drama than one could have imagined.
Wood. Oh, and he's just got pumped.
And cricket fans all over the world will be hoping the two countries can produce yet another spectacle in the grand finale. The Kiwis, though, will be without the services of their wicketkeeper batsman Devin Conway, who suffered a freak injury in the semis.
So well placed.
Conway, who made a fluent 38 ball 46 in the semis, broke his right hand after punching his bat out of frustration following his dismissal in the game against England. Tim Seifert, the other wicketkeeper batsman in the squad, is expected to replace him in the playing 11. In head-to-head encounters, New Zealand have only won 4 out of 14 T20 international games, while Australia have won 9 of those matches till date. However, the Black Caps possess a far superior record when it comes to the shortest format this year. In comparison, Aaron Finch's men have lost more games than they've won this year.
In the final, Australia just too strong. Yeah, New Zealand.
The final clash between the two sides will be a rematch of the 2015 ODI World Cup final, a game that Australia won by 7 wickets.
Australia.
The Aussies are the most successful 50-over side, but they have never won the T20 World Cup. They'll be hoping they can add to their trophy cabinet on Sunday. New Zealand, though, have time and again showed why they are one of the best teams in the world.
He's got it! England have won the World Cup by the barest of...
From losing the 2019 World Cup final by the barest of margins,
Absolute ecstasy for England! Agony! Agony for New Zealand!
Whips that one away, and how appropriate.
to winning the inaugural World Test Championship, Kane Williamson's men have been phenomenal in the past few years.
David versus Goliath.
Daryl Mitchell does it for New Zealand.
A first ever World Cup win would be the perfect end for a team that always seemed to punch above their weight.
Brilliant from
A cracking encounter awaits us all. Sports Bureau, India Today.
17.
Right, Sunil Gavaskar and Wasim Akram still with us. Sunil, starting with you, we often talk about rivalries in cricket. You talk about India, Pakistan, you talk about Australia versus England. But there's a bit of needle in Australia versus New Zealand too. Trans-Tasman rival that they are. Big brother versus younger brother, quite often referred to as that.
Oh, definitely. Make no mistake, I think there's a heck of a rivalry between Australia and New Zealand. And that rivalry has actually has increased ever since that incident way back in 40 years ago. The underarm, since then, I think it has taken a new turn, and it's a lot more fierce, a lot more intense rivalry between these two countries when they meet each other on the cricket ground.
All right, Saima, interestingly that you talk about 40 years ago, that incident, and the last time I was looking at the stats, the last time that New Zealand beat Australia in a knockout game also came way back in 1981. So it's been a long time coming for them to have beaten them in a knockout game. But just looking at now the New Zealand team, they're looking rather dangerous. But the biggest blow for them, Devin Conway, you know, the man who got them runs in the semi-final, has been injured. How is that going to impact this Kiwi team that have barely made any sort of changes to their playing 11 throughout this tournament?
But it will make a huge impact because Devin Conway is a quality player. We've seen him at the test level. He made his test debut with a double 100, and then this year itself. So he's been in very good form. His last 12 months have been absolutely top class for him. As a batsman, he scored thousands of runs. He's a wicketkeeper. He's a left-hander. So we saw that combination of Darryl Mitchell and Devon Conway at the crease, how they took the game away from England, starting slowly but then accelerating after that. And so, yes, and then again after that, Jimmy Neesham and Darryl Mitchell, the left and right hand combination. So Conway not being around is going to be a huge player. Man in form and somebody who brings in left-handedness into the equation.
Very interesting, Saimbai, because you talk about that left-hander. I'm just taking a look at their team. So now they'll have all their top 5 players as right-handers. Now to just mix things up, do you reckon it'd be a good idea? Maybe you could promote someone like a Neesham or a Santner to, have that left-hander in that batting order a little higher up?
I don't think New Zealand will look to make too many changes unless they get into a position, say around the 14th or the 15th over, and they're really either struggling, they have got too many runs, but they still have wickets in hand, and they might have a Neesham going up. So it could well happen. We've seen the way Neesham turned the game around against England. Yes, I think that could happen. But I think by and large, they don't look to make too many changes to their plans. They stick to their plans.
All right, so I've been blabbering these stats right from the start of the program. That out of the 18 games that these two teams have played in, ICC tournaments, 12 times, that's a winning percentage of almost 75% in favor of the Australian team. Does that give them any sort of psychological advantage?
It definitely does. I think when you've won more often than you've lost, then you just enter the field feeling that, come what may, that you will be able to turn it around. And so the Australians, I think, are on a roll. They've got the momentum. In the knockout, it's not just against New Zealand. In the knockouts against most teams, they have an unbelievable record. So they will fancy their chances of claiming this ICC 2020 Cup for the first time.
Okay, now Australia go into this particular tournament. I agree, Wasim Bhai, on this one. This particular match as the favourites. Wasim Bhai, that wasn't the case, when the tournament started. No one really counted them as one of the favourites. Do you reckon one major reason why now Australia are being considered the favourite for the final is that striking of form of David Warner?
Australia weren't the favourites even to qualify for the 4 tops because of their recent performances, recent T20 form. And yes, David Warner is one of the main parts of the Australian cricket team, especially in this format. He's a fighter, he fights hard, he feels well, and obviously the way he bats. He's a very aggressive batsman and he's in good nick, picked, like you said, picked at the right time. And although Australians, we've seen Smith is struggling so far in this playing 11 for Australia, but they're looking good, they're fast. Bowling is really good, and I think eventually in knockout stages, obviously Pakistan couldn't attack Maxwell and Stoinis. They bowled 4 overs because they don't have a 5th regular bowler, so they got to bowl with either Maxwell or Stoinis, and I think New Zealand will be definitely eyeing on them. But in general, they look very strong, especially after yesterday's win.
Okay, let me get you, Saimbai, on that David Warner question. You reckon one thing that really makes him dangerous, we often see with batsmen when they're not in great form, they tend to slow down as far as their strike rate is concerned. You don't see that with David Warner. No matter what the situation of the match, no matter what his personal form, I look at his strike rate, striking at almost 150, and that's what really makes him dangerous.
Yes, because that's the way he knows how to play. He's not much of defending the ball in any form of the game. Even at the test level, he will look to take the attack to the opposition, and more often than not, he has succeeded. That's why he's been such a wonderful player for Australia in all 3 formats of the game. I don't think he's going to change his approach. He might get out, and the Australians will allow him that. The Australians know that if he gets going, he's going to take the game away. So they will allow him to play the game that he knows best, and that is to go after bowling straight away.
Okay, I'm just now looking at the Kiwi camp, and I'm going to quote Jimmy Neesham here. This is what he said after the semi-final. He said, "You don't come halfway across the world just to win a semi-final." When he was asked to express his happiness about, winning that crucial semi-final. Clearly, this sums up the attitude of this Kiwi team. They don't want to end up with the wooden spoon. They want that trophy in their hands.
Definitely does. Look, this will be the 2nd title in the year for them. Because don't forget, in June, they beat India in the World Test Championship finals. So that's 1 title, one trophy in their hand. And they had a wonderful reception when they went back to New Zealand. It's a small country, all right, but they had a very, very fine reception from the cricket lovers there. Remember, rugby is the #1 sport there, but when they saw this, world title, every New Zealander was delighted, very proud. And I think that memory is what will spur this team on as well. Because they win here again, they will get a similar kind of reception. Although, of course, they will come to India to play the 320s, 3T20s and a test match before going home. But they win, they go back in December, they'll get a marvelous reception and they'll have a marvelous Christmas.
Right. I don't know whether it will be really good for cricket. Share your thoughts with me to have the same champion who's the Test champion as well as the T20 champion. At least it will prove to everyone that Test cricket still remains the best format. If you excel in Test cricket, you can excel in any format.
That is generally the case. That is generally the case. Because see, what Test match teaches you is to get your technique right, to get your temperament to be very sound, to be able to withstand all kinds of pressures. And once you do that, then it becomes a little bit easier to go into the other formats. You play a lot more if you're organized as a bowler, organized as a batsman. Those things stand you in good stead when you have to try and do the unorthodox stuff in the white ball game.
Okay, Wasim, I'm going to ask the same question that I asked Sunny about Jimmy Neesham. I just gave the quote of what he was saying, that he's not come here to win just the semi-final. In fact, he's not just saying it, he's also walking the talk. Because if you remember that image that went viral after that semi-final is of Jimmy Neesham sitting there motionless after his team has won such an exciting contest. He doesn't even get up to celebrate or clap. And when people really asked him on social media that, you seem so ice cold, he said, hey, I've not just come here to be happy after winning the semi-final. Clearly, they're walking the talk, this Kiwi team.
Yeah, I mean, if you see what happened with them during the last 2019 World Cup finals, England and New Zealand, and I suppose law of physics, maybe they deserve to win. I'm not so sure. They're a good side, no doubt. They have very good spinners. Both of them, Centener and of course Sodhi. So their attack is kind of complete as far as five bowlers concerned, and equally good sides. But if you ask me who are the favourites for tomorrow, I think the way, like you said, Nikhil, early on, Australians have an edge for Sunday's final.
Very interesting. Wasim bhai there says Australia to him are the favourites. If I was to ask you to pick a winner, who would you go with?
I would say that if Devon Conway was fit, maybe I would have said 50-50. But with Devon Conway not there, a new batsman, new person coming in, he played just the first match. Tim Seifert, he hasn't played after that. It's not going to be easy for New Zealand. And like I said, Australia's record in the knockouts is awesome.
All right. Just going to, we're talking about who the favourites are. Is it going to be Australia? Is it going to be New Zealand? Wasim, if I could come to you, all this talk about the team that's in form and, the matchups and everything. At the end of the day, you reckon all of it is going to boil down on who wins the toss? Because we've seen it throughout the league phases. We saw it in the two semi-finals. The team that is chasing ends up on the winning side.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not fair. I've been saying it all along. They have to come up with some ideas. Okay, we can't afford maybe covered stadiums, but either start in the afternoon, give a fair chance to both the sides. What you don't want, what it has been, we have seen in this World Cup, you win the toss, 90% you win the game, 80% maybe you win the game. And these are very good odds for team chasing. So yes, the toss will make an effect, and teams who won't toss, the 7-10 to win I mean, like I said, 80%, and that's not fair.
Okay, Saiva, just help us out here. Wasim bhai says that we need to come up with better ideas. It's not fair. How about this idea? We saw a few games that New Zealand and Australia were played in the afternoon because it suited their television audience. How about this idea of having the final in the afternoon? Takes away that due factor. Also, is prime time for the two finalists.
That makes eminent sense. Really makes eminent sense. Looking at the way things have panned out in this tournament. And at some stage that the due factor comes in. So maybe even for the knockout stages, they could have said, we will have a look and then we'll decide. Because look, once you come to the semi-finals, before a ball is bowled, both teams are aware that the match is now going to start in the afternoon and not in the evening. So both sides then prepare themselves mentally to be able to take the extra sort of weather issue with the heat in UAE, or wherever you're playing. Also, I think they take into account that there might be no due factor, so the composition of their final playing 11 might change. So yes, I think it is something that organizers all over the world, and not necessarily in the ICC events, but maybe look at that if it comes to the finals, rather than have, the toss and the dew play a major role, why don't we play it in the afternoon? Because the viewership is going to be great anyway. It's the finals, so viewership is going to be fantastic.
All right, and it's going to be played in Sunday. Why just prime time for Australia and New Zealand? In fact, all across the world, people would have time to watch. As Sunny was saying, there is going to be enough viewership there. Plenty then for the organizers to chew on. Sunil Gavaskar, Wasim Akram, thanks so much for joining us, and always a pleasure talking to you as we were building up to that big final. I started the program giving stats in favor of Australia. Let me end by giving you some stats that favor the New Zealand team. The only one time these two teams have played in a T20 World Cup, on that occasion, it was New Zealand that ended up on the winning side. That's all that we have on the program. But before we leave you, just a reminder that on this day in 2014, Rohit Sharma recorded the highest ever ODI score at the Eden Gardens, 264 runs of 173 balls against Sri Lanka. The fact that Rohit had not played any international cricket for 3 months before the innings with a finger injury highlights what a big achievement it was for the hitman. There were in fact questions on whether Rohit should be taken back into the squad and if India should instead open with Ajinkya Rahane and Robin Uthappa. He ended up opening the innings with Rahane, and the rest, as they say, is history. Thanks so much for watching.
Well, that'll be another boundary, and he reaches 250 with that. Second batsman in the history of the game to score 250 runs in a limited overs.